Hello and welcome to the Dream Job Ready podcast and video series. My name is Dane Sharp, I'm your host, and my special guest for this episode is Jeff Reibel, who's the CEO of the North Queensland Cowboys National Rugby League Football Club.
Please note that the opinions of guests are their own and not those of the companies they have worked for. This is Dream Job Ready with Dane Sharp.
Hey Jeff, thank you so much for joining me as a guest on Dream Job Ready. Mate, CEO of a National Rugby League football club, the North Queensland Cowboys. That is legitimately the dream job. How did you get your role with the team, mate?
Dane, thanks for the opportunity. And I think, like anything in life, you know, when I graduated as an accountant back in 1995, I always had an aspiration in sports, but to actually be here has been quite the journey. And I've had jobs in schools, in private schools. But I think what really put me forward for this one was, if I go back to 1997, my first job in sport professionally, I suppose, was with the Cowboys. And back then there was Super League. We had an under-17 squad, and my brother relocated from Bowen up to Townsville. I was working at the Townsville Grammar School back then, and they needed a team manager, which essentially was a water bottle filler and some ice bag filler. And I put my hand up for that, and my sport career began. So for the first 5 or 6 years, I had a full-time job as a business manager in private schools over in the UK as well, but juggled that with the different roles within the Cowboys or representative teams and the like, which really opened up my eyes and my world to be able to work in sport.
Mate, that is amazing. From water filler to CEO. That's you got a dream job now, but that's almost a Hollywood script. Are you a rugby league family? Like you said, your brother played league. Is your family a rugby league family?
Yeah, we are. Both of my brothers had a lot more talent than me on the rugby league field. And we're from a small place called Bowen in North Queensland. And, even growing up, my mum and dad were involved with the junior footy club. My mum was on, I think she was secretary for a time there as well. But, mate, we were what I classify bushies. We were brought up on a farm out in the bush a bit, and sport in small towns is your outlet, whether it be footy or cricket or whatever it may be. So my brother Grant played here from 96 through to the early 2000s. My other brother Wesley had a bit more of a role down south, and then he went into the Air Force from there, the Navy from there. And so, mate, sport's always run within us. I am not a sportsman's shoelace, very solid under 15 career, Dane. So to be able to, sport is my passion. And I think, and in the times that we're living in at the moment, a lot of people are missing that passion or that outlet on the weekend. And, when in my role, in any role when you work in sport, you work towards that game day. That's your reward. And in my case, when the boys run out in front of 20,000 people and 1 million people on TV, that gives me nothing but pride. That says to me everything that we've done that week or whatever we're doing is all worth it. So that sporting background for me to be able to mix sport with business, which is what was always my forte as such, is something that, mate, and you said it, your podcast says it, it's a dream job.
Yeah, that's great, mate. And the word passion is so critical for any type of role and any type of enjoyment that you need to and want to get out of your job. But obviously working in sport it hits home to me and millions of others around the world. So we've got plenty we could discuss. There's a couple of key things I'd love to sort of stay laser focused on through you. One is I look at your career history and it, you started at the club, but you've done multiple things and had some really kind of great steps to obviously get there, which when I look at it on paper it makes complete sense. But I am keen to make sure that from you, what was strategic, what was luck, what was what was thought out, what just happened, etc., to help you get there. And then I think the second thing, which I think will really be beneficial for my listeners, is you're the CEO of this club. There's, as I said, there's millions of people that would love to work for a sporting club. What do people need to do, and what do you look for in talent? Certainly in a challenging time like this, where you've people are everything. So you've had to manage the difficulties that we've had. But for those people wanting to make a career move into sport or dreaming about working for the club they love, or even just another club that they don't love. Those are the tidbits I'd love to get out of you. So, let's talk about your first I say your first official, because that other the water filling was, but the sales and marketing manager role that you got in 2003. If we can start there, because straight away you don't always see sales and marketing in the same job title. I think both are friendly, and sometimes the teams clash, but you need both to represent. Talk to me about getting that job. How did you get it? And I guess how quickly did it bring you into the business world?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. Sales and marketing, never the twain shall meet, really. And that was the title that I suppose worked to in the last part of that role, which was a 7-year role, as you said. And I actually started off as the corporate hospitality sales manager. And I've still got my first business card that I stuck to my desk here, actually, because of what it meant to me at the time. And interestingly, at that time, I was studying my MBA. And the fellow who was what was termed the marketing manager of the club, which is now the commercial manager, he was studying at the same time. Lewis Ramsey's his name, and he's now our chairman. And Lewis and I were working together, and one day he said to me, "Mate, I might have a job for you at the club." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm listening." And we had a good chat about it. And he said, "Mate, it's a sales role." And I said, "Mate, when I conjured up sales back then, the old door-to-door, vacuum cleaner or encyclopedia, I said, 'Mate, I'm not a salesman.'" And he said to me, "Mate, in this job with this club, you don't have to be a salesman. You have to be passionate about your community and passionate about our product." And that's what I was. And so that allowed me to come into an organisation which I've grown to absolutely love, and an organisation that I've been part of on and off now for 15 years. And back then, we only had 20-odd staff members full-time. And straight away, and I say this to anybody, when you've got the opportunity to do what you are in progression, number one, luck doesn't play any part of it. You make your own luck with your hard work. But you do that through your networking, and you do that with seeking out mentorship. And I've been really fortunate to have some of the most wonderful mentors in my time here, and also in my time working through the sporting industry. And none of that was on a formal basis, Dane. That was all about, growing those networks, earning those people's trust. And then really importantly, and the reason why I was able to come back to the club, staying in touch with those people and not burning those bridges. So mate, essentially my role went from corporate hospitality sales manager into a business development role. And then back then at the time, membership was coming a little bit more prevalent in the NRL. They were really pushing in that. And we're very fortunate because of the passionate community and also the businesses that we had around North Queensland. Our corporate sales program, because of that, was quite a program where we were sold out. So what I was able to do was look into that marketing side, do some more study around that to see, okay, how can I fit in with that? So that's where the sales and marketing role came from as such. And I made the conscious decision as a family, my wife and I, in 2010 to move from North Queensland down to the Gold Coast. And that was actually a personal decision. And when I look back on it now, it was a decision I say is personal, but there was career objectives in there. It'd be fair to say spinning my wheels just a little bit. And whilst I love what I do and the like, it's important that you're not insular. It's important you go out and get other experience and other experiences. And as you've said, I went to the Gold Coast and ended up with a role at the Titans. Now, I went into the role at the Titans, and one thing I'm really proud of about that was Michael Searle was the owner of the Titans back then. And Michael said to me, "Mate, I haven't really got a role, but I heard you can do what you do, so I'm going to employ you." And that said to me, okay, well, that networking is working. And I went to the Titans, rightly or wrongly, at a really interesting time in them as a club. They were getting established. They were only in the league for a couple of years. They were coming off a fair bit of success where they made the grand final qualifier. But there was always those, I suppose, people talking about the money situation down there. And what I walked into there and I'd learnt from there how you deal with certain elements around business that challenge you, how people react to that is really important, and you as a leader, the influence and I suppose the objectives and also the examples that you set through that. And that time at the Titans was around 18 months. It was a turbulent time. However, again, I was able to really connect with some good people in that base. And leaving North Queensland, you got to remember North Queensland and Townsville we're a big country area as such, but our club is built on its community roots. Down on the Gold Coast and the transient nature of the population and the like, that was really different for me. And, I came out of my time at the Titans with a lot of lessons, with some great networks, and my old mate Chris Choppy Close, who, State of Origin legend now. I'm fortunate, I can call him at any time to have a chat. But it led to another opportunity, and that was the way that I was looking at it. Look at these opportunities. And someone in sport, at the time, V8 Supercars was just absolutely killing it, mate. And from your background, it was in that mid-2000s to late 2000s, they were, at pinnacle and starting to get close to, the bigger codes around their commerciality. I wanted to be part of that. I really wanted to be part of that. And I was on SIG, funnily enough, and a sponsor servicing position came up with Stone Brothers Racing, okay? And that's fellows by the name of Ross and Jimmy Stone, Marcus Ambrose, Russell Ingle drove for them and won 3 championships. Shane Van Gisbergen and Scott McLaughlin were development drivers and the like. So they come from great pedigree at SBR. And it was a job that I was overqualified for, but I saw an opportunity. So I got myself an interview. And rather than sitting down for the normal interview, I actually pitched to the commercial manager and to Ross Stone that rather than sponsoring servicing, why don't you look at a business development manager? I could be that business development manager. I could bring with me, without being arrogant about it, the experience that I've got from outside of V8s. You teach me the V8 business, and I think we can get some incrementals here. And to Ross's credit, and also a fellow by the name of Chris Wilson, who's a commercial manager, and he now runs Team Penske over in the US from a marketing and a commercial operations. Him and I worked together for a number of years. And then I jumped into the V8 world, and man, what a circus, and I learned pretty quickly about where their commercial success was and also the pressures on that business. And working for a guy like Ross Stone, who had a staff of 80 odd people in V8s, and we had a fully complemented workshop. And you got to remember, I'm not a car guy. Like if I had to go to race meetings, I'd love the spectacle. And when people would talk to me, one of my jobs was to give them pit tours. If you've ever been to a V8 race commercially, what's under the hood, Jeff? This, my eyes would glaze over. But, the experience that I got from there, where I was then exposed to markets, not just in the east coast of Australia, but all of Australia. We raced over in New Zealand. We raced in Abu Dhabi and in Texas during my times there. And quite interestingly, I came at a time of expansion in V8 supercars where the old traditional Ford and Holden rivalry was getting expanded. Nissan came in, Volvo came in, and the opportunity for Ross and Jimmy Stone was that the factory backing from Ford was dwindling at that time. A lady by the name of Betty Klemenko came along, and Betty actually bought Stone Brothers Racing, turned it into what's now known as Erebus Motorsport. And that's when we were racing in those years, the Mercedes AMG package. So we introduced those AMG Mercedes to the grid. Now, when you look back on it, what was achieved to, all of the rules and regulations and parity that you had to do, which I don't understand too well, what we achieved and what those guys achieved to be able to get those cars on the grid in that year was just absolutely unbelievable. Betty's an interesting character, and I think a lot of people who follow sport will see Betty. She's very colourful. She's the daughter of the late John Saunders, who co-founded Westfield with Frank Lowy. And what you can't what you can't say about Betty is, what you can't knock about Betty, sorry, is her passion for what she does as such. So that was a really interesting time in my career, and I could have gone one of two ways there. That I was on the road for about 140, 150 nights a year when you look at all the events that you go to, and I didn't have the passion for it anymore because the people that I had the passion with were no longer there. And it's interesting. I go to V8 events now, and a lot of the guys that were in our workshop, are working either for Penske or Walkinshaw or whatever it may be. And I mentioned Chris before. He's a guy that, he could have said and used his ego, I suppose, and said, mate, I'm the commercial manager. I don't need a BDM. And him and I then hit it off. We complemented each other really well, and what my lesson out of that was the humility that I was able to bring, and the way that I was able to bring it allowed me to earn the trust of some people that are thinking, what's this guy with a footy background doing in our sport? And I made a decision, it was actually at Bathurst back in 2014, that I'd had enough of that. And the reason I had enough was my family was on the Gold Coast. I was, as I said, everywhere. And one thing I really yearned about in rugby league and in other sports, and what I was used to, is you had that home ground, you had that connection within your community and the like. And that didn't happen in VH. You visit an area for 5 days, you do what you can do there, and then you say, see you later, we'll see you next year. So I made the decision that, if there's an opportunity to get back into rugby league, that's what I'd like to do. And there was an opportunity to go back to the Titans at that time in late 2014. But this is where I suppose the lesson around mentoring and keeping contacted and networking. I reached out to who is now our director of football, Peter Parr, at the club here, who was my CEO when I worked at the club, which is really unique now. I'm CEO and he's our director of football, and our then chairman, Lawrence Lancini. And I just wrote him a note and said, guys, this is what I'm thinking about doing. You've had a lot of influence on my career. I wanted to let you know where I'm at. And quite interestingly, and I shows it's a reflection of the man that within 24 hours, Lawrence was on the Gold Coast having lunch with my wife and myself, saying to me, mate, are you ready to come home? And this is home. And on Australia Day, on January in 2015, I started back at the club here in a commercial role. And it's really interesting how things work out. The fellow who I was reporting to at the time, Steve Mitchell, Steve is now the CEO of the Titans. And Steve left our club to, I suppose, expand his wings, where he ended up down at the Melbourne Rebels and then CEO of Touch Football Australia, and is now at the Titans. And with Steve making that decision to leave, gave me another step or earned me that step on the pathway. And, in October of 2018, or September of 2018, sorry, that was when I was approached if I would consider taking an acting role as CEO of the club, and when I look at that time from 2010 leaving the club to coming back at 15, the type of person that I was and what I valued and who I thought and my personal brand. And a lot of people talk a lot of words, they talk, but, I like to be simple, but I also like to be authentic, and that's one of my characteristics of my brand, about being authentic and conscientious from that respect. And I said, I would love to do that, but I need to understand, as a club, where we're heading, what are we doing? And, I was able to put that forward to the chair and the board at the time and talk about structure and our people. And it's really interesting as a club and as a sport, rugby league just grew. The dollars that came into the game from the TV broadcast and what the salary cap was and the like. And I wanted to make sure as a club and as a game, we knew who we were and what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so a lesson for me is, never be afraid to look outside of that circle of influence and say, well, how am I going to get challenged here? And what we did was we employed somebody externally to come in and have a look at our club. get feedback from staff, feedback from myself, from the board, look at our strategic direction. And it's what you can see in the background that, we learned pretty early on that we need to get a focus, a purpose. And that purpose, believe it or not, it's simple. It's there. What can we do to make a winning football team? And from that purpose, we're able to create our trademarks and our values. And something that I'm particularly proud of in those trademark and values is that we use them across the club. Whether you're Michael Morgan, our captain, who enters the field of battle, or somebody in our community department or our financial controller, we have a common platform across the club around our purpose and what our trademarks are and how we behave and act and interact with each other, which I think is so crucial to a high-functioning organisation to be able to be agile, cross-functionality, but have that common purpose across it and common vocabulary. So that was a really important part for me to be able to set us on the pathway forward. We introduced a COO into the club, and without sounding incestuous, that COO, Michael Luck, was working within the club. He played for us in first grade, also played 150 games for the Warriors. But when Michael was a development manager at our club, he used to live at my place as well. So what we're able to do is find that trust and that structure straight away between Michael, Paul Green, our head coach, Peter Parr, our director of football, and myself. What we were then able to do is build the teams around us, and we're really fortunate. We got some of the best in the business here. And what doesn't work in any organisation, in particular in sport, is silos. And what we had to do was get rid of those, get rid of any chance of that happening. And we then worked together to come up with our strategic pillars, because at the time in the club, we're coming to a real pivotal time. We're about to move stadiums. We've got to play one game in that new stadium, before COVID hit. We're investing in the Cowboys Community Training and High Performance Centre. That's a $40 million investment, which will be our home and our high performance centre. But we've done it in a model where it'll also be a revenue stream, so we can diversify what we're doing from a revenue perspective. And also in my role as CEO here, I'm the director of our foundation. Now, as our foundation, the Cowboys Community Foundation, we run and are responsible for NRL Cowboys House, which is a boarding facility for 100 Indigenous remote students. And how does education fit into a sporting team? Well, it's giving these kids the inspiration and the opportunity, and removing travel and distance as a barrier to their education. But also they are and they relate to our brand, the Cowboys, and what we mean in the community. So we've got 100 students in there that we partner with 8 different schools at as well, to make sure that these young men and women get an education. And we had our first 4 graduates just last year on that. So one of the key takeouts for me out of all of this is, as a club, we are a footy club. That's our heart and soul. But we mean so much more to what we do in North Queensland. And it's because of what we do on the field, the type of people, the type of players that we're able to attract and retain and nurture. Guys like Jonathan Thurston, Matthew Scott, Matthew Bowen, Matthew Singh, guys like that, Michael Morgan, who's a local junior and is now our club captain. It's because of all that which allows us to do those other wonderful things that we've talked about. But when you stray away from your core business, you've got to ensure that your core business is rock solid. And stray is not the right word. We made some real, I suppose, educated and well thought out decisions to do what we do. But you need to make sure that core is still in place. And I see my role, I term myself a conscientious leader. At the end of the day, I need to make a decision. I need to be decisive, but also I need to ensure that I take on board the fact that I've got these wonderful professionals around me, their opinion, and value that opinion, and then make the decision from there. So rather than that autocratic style, that conscientious style is something that I believe has given me the opportunity to get me to where I am today.
Mate, that is great, and I think you've got about 1,000 CVs in your inbox already after people just listen to that. Passion, it was one of the first things you said in the first question, but it's it seems like it just runs rich in you, which is awesome. And I remember a previous guest I've had, Angela Sun, who's in a very different field. She's a TV anchor over in the States. She talked about how passion leads to purpose, which you segued to as well. And that's brilliant. One thing which I think people find really interesting, and I've sort of got the goosebumps on the arms, is that the NRL and a football club, so professional these days. It must have changed so much since your first job there, and as you said, the amount of money, the amount of investment, the amount of focus on professional sport, professional rugby league, and professional rugby league club is enormous these days. But it really hits home that it still sounds like such a kind of a community, grassroots community, if you will. And I think that's an interesting barrier I think will break down for some people, because for those that are interested in working for sport and specifically for a professional code, I'd imagine it's a bit daunting to a few people. How am I going to get in? How am I going to crack that? There must be billions of people, which there is, that want to work there. I felt a similar thing when I worked for the Wollongong Hawks. That's a small town. Small cities, really, everybody knew everybody that was working for that club at the time, and they had some great success, and that was really awesome. So that must be something that really means a lot to you, having come up through the club. And I'd love to get a take on how you continue to help foster that in such a professional industry now with the people that you hire, because not everybody stays, as you've proved. So as new people come into the club and come from other clubs or other sports or other industries, how do you foster that real culture, I guess, as that key leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you are right. We pride ourselves on our point of difference that we are what we term a community-owned club. And our background is News Limited. News owned our club, and again, due to the fantastic work of the people at the time and the relationship that we have and still have with News, they then sold, when they exited, they sold us to our leagues club, which is owned by the community. And, it's really interesting in sport, and when you talk motorsport, you say, how do you make a lot of money out of motorsport? Well, you start with a lot of money, and one of the things with sport is it's really interesting that what's a sporting decision or what's best for the team isn't necessarily the best business decision to start with. And so you need to be able to balance that business and what you need from an outcome perspective for, and at the end of the day, it's those 17 guys that cross the white line every week that represent your club at the highest level as such. So people coming into our organisation, how do we ensure that they're ingrained to our culture? I'll go back to what I talked about with our purpose and our trademarks. We can't assume that when someone puts their CV into the Cowboys that they know the background of our club, that we were born in 95 and, in 1993, when the New South Wales Rugby League accepted our submission, we were able to do that because Forex Lion Nathan put up the money for it. So, and Forex is still one of our most wonderful partners to this date, and where we were born from and how the players turfed the field and the hill the night before our very first game against Canterbury Bankstown. Now, I know that because I've been part of that club. I learnt that. So what we need to ensure, and what any organisation needs to ensure if they're going to set a culture, is they give the people the opportunity to know that background. And we've done some really simple things around induction videos, induction booklets. We have, just this year, we were able to constitute a whole day where everybody who worked from the club, from our chairman down to player number 36, were in the one room at the one time, and we were really able to do some work around that and reshape and revalue our values and our trademarks and the like. So one of the important things about people coming to us is knowing straight away our purpose, what our strategic intent is, and our behaviours on how we're going to get to that strategic intent. And just as importantly, letting them know that the ideas, what they bring with them and the professionalism that they can bring to our club is something that's really important to us. Again, that insular nature, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to be able to, and as a leader, the last thing I say to my guys on a one-on-one is, have you got anything that I need to know? I need the feedback to be able to ensure that I'm leading the club the way that we talk about from a values perspective, but also in the direction. And I suppose, what we've all lived through over the last couple of months, that was one of the hardest jobs, and a job that I never thought I had to do, where I had to look close to 85 people in the eye and let them know that they have to stand down, and it's that communication, that clarity with them, because they understand who we are and what we do and why we need to do that. And it's my job now to be able to get those people back into the club as well, and us, and they've been very patient. We've had people come in and volunteer and do what we need to do. So that to me is setting the right culture. And your pyramid is only as pointy with when your base right, and that's what we're working on, and we continue to work on very hard. You can never get complacent around that, and that's in a business and also in a sporting arena. You're not going to produce the Michael Morgans, the Kyle Felts, and the Matthew Scotts if you haven't got that development system right down the bottom as well.
Just on development, and specifically career and personal development within the career, you've had the opportunity, even within the same club, have moved and changed roles, and then also with other establishments. As a boss, as a CEO now, I guess responsible and probably KPI to some degree to retainment. How does someone in your position, with the experience you've had, how do you manage, the advice to people that, hey, movement, in your career can be good, is good, should be done? Where do you stand on that? What advice do you give to people?
Yeah, and it's something that I'm still developing as a leader as well, to be ensure, and it's something that you said before, that has said if I had a little bit of time again, I wouldn't change a thing, except that I would always be more confident than I was 10, 15 years ago, knowing what, and I suppose hindsight's a wonderful thing. I'm a big person about earning that respect, and with those people I can have those open and honest conversations that I think we all know when time is right to be able to go and look at different ways. Professional development is huge for me internally as well, and we had, and we have to reshape it after COVID, but that professional development budget for us is an important thing where people get to grow and nurture. And the headlines are like there is not only for that person, but it also helps the club. So we have, I call them real conversations. We have those real conversations daily, and I get them back to me as well. But my next step as a leader is to ensure that when I sit down and we're seeking that advice, that people can come to me freely in the way that, hey, here's the opportunities. What can we do? And how can that advance myself in the club, or do I have to go and look to come back in some case? And I've said it a couple of times, but being an insular, and I think, listeners will hear that I've been here and I've gone and I'm back again. But I maintain that if I didn't go and I didn't have the career experiences that I did and travelled that path, I wouldn't be talking to you today in this role. I probably would have, heaven forbid, maybe still sitting in that role, thinking about what if, rather than going out and making it happen.
Yeah, I think you're exact in what you're saying there. I think there's so much opportunity for growth at all times in existing roles, but the rapid succession of that growth, or the quickness that you're forced into things occasionally, really comes from that movement. And I love what you said before around, creating your own job title to some degree in a couple of those roles, because I think that's so interesting. And I think, from my opinion, and I'd love your quick opinion on it, it seems like, organisations are now very open to that, because you see all the stats come out that said, the 20 best job titles in 10 years don't exist today. So, you're a bit old school if you kind of, staying to that kind of script of job descriptions. But I think there's something in that. And I really hope people listen to that part of what you said, or go back and listen to that part in the podcast where you talked about that. Because, as a leader, you've got to be open to new opportunities and new thinking as well, right?
Yeah, you do. And it's really funny where that epiphany happened for me was, again, when we were leaving Townsville to go to the Gold Coast, my wife and I agreed that was it for sport. the ups and downs of sport, and stability and sport don't normally go hand in hand. We're very fortunate again here with our club, the way that we built it, that we have some stability there. But you look around the world, the amount of soccer clubs, the amount of other professional teams that are traded and sold, all but on a monthly basis to be able to get to it. And I was updating my LinkedIn profile, and I had someone do that for me with a resume, and I asked them to skew it towards that I want to get a job back in schools, because I saw that as a really safe industry and an industry that will ensure that I can provide for my family. And funnily enough, an industry that I still, I sit on some boards of schools, where I still have a passion for. But I saw that as safe, and I thought at the time that's what I needed to be. And when I submitted that email, and the email came back and said, Jeff, mate, you work in sport, and that's where you are now. That's a niche industry. You've carved it out. You either got to own it. You got to own that industry. You got to own your style, or you're going to have to start all over again. And that was I look back now. I just thought to myself, bastard, I want to go back to schools. I'm paying you. Do what I bloody asked you to do. But I go back now. And that's what led me to the Titans, which led me on this pathway of the journey now. And again, when I talk about that confidence that I would have liked to have 10, 15 years ago, it was people telling me that because of my style, I'm not confrontationalist. I like to work out where things have come from, get informed decisions. You will never be a CEO because of your style, okay? And it was when I started getting some executive coaches and really growing comfortable with my style, rather than trying to be somebody else, I embraced who I was and then worked out how is my style, how can I fit that to a role such as a CEO. And that's what I spent my time on the last 4 or 5 years, and was able to come out on that other side. So I say to people, you're right, I don't get caught up in titles in any way, shape or form. And, that MultiSkilling and indeed in the post-COVID world, an agile structure and a cross-functional structure is going to be key to any business's success. In particular, businesses in our industry, whether that be sports, entertainment, hospitality, that are suffering the most at the moment, to come out that other side. So that's something that I think is, if someone would have given me that direction 10 years ago, or I would have found it myself, things could be different. But things happen for a reason. You put yourself in that position. And again, I wouldn't change a thing.
Mate, I'm smiling because I've got a couple of quick fire questions at you. And one of them was, what's the worst bit of advice you've had? And I think you just answered it. You'd never be a CEO. Well, that person was wrong, which is gold.
No.
I got a couple of quick ones for you. If you don't mind, I'll throw them at you, as they can be one-word answers, they can be one sentence, whatever you're up to. I'll fly through them, and I'll finish off with our student question of the week, which we do in every episode, and I really like this one, and I think you'll have a good answer for it. You've had the opportunity to work with an elite sporting legend, Jonathan Thurston. What was your relationship like with him while he was at the club playing, and his work ethic, which I've heard is amazing? What did it teach you in your career?
We've always had a relationship. We have quite a close relationship now because Jonathan works for the club. You will never find a bloke that will do those 1%ers any better than Jonathan Thurston. And what he has taught me is that you can come from anywhere if you, with hard work and perseverance, mixed in with the talent that you've got, the world's your oyster, and here's a guy that, came to us in 1995, played the grand final for us this year. He is a leader of our country, Jonathan, and you look at it now, he works for us, he works for Channel 9, he's got his own academy, and people really look up to him, and I do too, and I cherish the time that I get to have with him, which is quite a lot now, and a number of times him and I get to travel together to visit, whether it be our partners or government representatives, and I still learn off him every day.
As a CEO, you're not just working in sport, you're also working in finance and legal matters and marketing and sales and everything in between that you've already talked about. I think it'll surprise a lot of people how diverse the staff is and the skill set is within a sporting club. What's one role or one department that you think would surprise people that exists in a football club?
That's a good question. We have our own multimedia department. So we have our own TV producer. We also have 2 cameramen. We have a full-time social media person, 2 people that look after our marketing and story writing and the like. And I just don't think, even in this day and age where, social media and moving, at the light speed that does, I don't think people would understand what we have there and the talent that we have that involves in a rugby league club. And another one quite as interesting is outside of our football department, our largest employment group at the club is actually in our community department. So I don't think you would think that in a footy club, the people that engage with the community with our education and wellbeing programs hold the most employment status. So that's an interesting one too.
Awesome. Now, if I dream of working for the North Queensland Cowboys, where's the opportunity in the next couple of years as a young career starter? Where should I be looking for that dream job opportunity?
Yeah, well, I suppose that there's 2 ways to look at it. If you're looking from an athlete management or a development perspective, there's that side of it. And you go back to what I was doing, we still have guys that do that for us now, okay? But if you wanted to get on the business side of it, my advice there is that multi-skilling, that agile, and be prepared. And it's sometimes difficult for Generation X's and the like to understand that you're not going to go straight into this high-powering job where you'll have people reporting to you. It's the opportunity to do those hard yards and earn the respect of the people around you to be able to come up. Be multi-skilled. That multi-skill, and again, I go back, I'm an accountant. I went back and got an MBA degree and did that MBA to look at the areas that outside of finance. So those all-rounders isn't the right word. You need to be the master of something, but you also need to be aware that in sport, at halftime you could be holding up a banner, you could be running the water, whatever that may be. So you need to be prepared for that multi-skillness around it.
You've obviously got hiring managers and your staff would help you onboard new employees to the club. Can you give me one critical thing you look for in a job applicant?
That's a really good question. But I look past their CV. One thing that I always like is when I meet that person, whether they can look directly at me, and when I ask them about themselves, what type of answer that is. And what I've always been really, I suppose, around is that work-life balance. At the moment, we haven't got a work-life balance because of what we're living through, and I think, and I'm really fortunate, I've got a family that supports me around that. And, you listen to those people who ask, what's your biggest achievement? And they want to answer it because they think you're asking, when I was in the top 10 in my university or whatever it might be as such. It's getting to know that person and that personality, I really think lets us know whether they're the right fit for our club. But also, just as importantly, when we need someone to do a particular role, that person needs to be strong enough. If I know that they're not the same style or personality as other people within the department, but we need them to do the job because we need them to agitate and the like, know that they're strong enough to be able to do that with the support mechanisms that we would give to them.
That's awesome, mate. And I think, that trait that you're looking in someone, I'm sure that there's a lot of confidence you're going to instill in an applicant doing that. And I think they're going to look at you and actually think this guy's going to be a great leader. So, I commend you on that. I think that's great. Now, student question of the week, always the best question that's asked in this episode. This week's question is from Denny, and she asks, what's the biggest rejection that you've had that you'd like to share, and what was your key learning from it? That's
an interesting one. It's an interesting one. It actually isn't quite employment related, but it relates back to a philosophy, I suppose. Is again, I remember when I first started working, and you'd get the items in the mail about signing up for an American Express or a Diners Club card or whatever that may be. And I wanted to be a little bit different, because back then Diners Club, whatever you spent on it, you had to pay it by the end of the month. So I thought, I want to be one of the high flyers with a Diners Club card. That surely is impressive. I filled out the application, and then when they said, how much are you going to spend a month on it? I went, $100, that's all I can afford. I got rejected from that. And I thought to myself, why the bloody hell would they send it to me if they're rejecting me about that? But it taught me a real lesson. You need to earn the right to be able to have a card like that, or whatever it may be. So at the time I was kicking stones. I rang them. I rang them to try and get an explanation, but they just, look, go away, young man. But I would say that there was that one. But I, from an employment perspective, again, when I was on the Gold Coast, I thought I had a job to run a sport facility down there, and it was something that I really pumped myself up for, because there was an element of athletes in there, an element of finance, an element of business, and an element actually of boarding, which was part of what I used to do in schools. And I got the phone call to say I was the preferred applicant, and then nothing happened for 4 to 6 weeks. And I was really let down, only to read in the Sunday Mail that there was some sort of, I suppose, scandal around the ownership of it, and the government structure around it and the like. So that was a pretty big rejection for me, but again, turned out to be a positive. So I hope I've answered that as well as I could.
Interesting one, mate. I like it. I've never heard anyone getting rejected from a Diners Club card for the starters.
Have you ever tried? Have you ever tried?
I don't think I have, to be honest. No.
I don't even know if they're around anymore.
No, I won't, just to avoid my own rejection. I'll stick with that. And I think from the career one, I imagine some of the legalities that you would have been looking at with that scandal at that business has probably even subconsciously helped you kind of avoid it in your own front, in your own roles. So. Hey, Jeff, I've really enjoyed this, mate. I think, I feel great about the people that work under you, to be honest. You come across as a super, inspirational and motivational leader, and someone that really cares for, the people and the business that you're working for. So, anyone that does work for you is welcome to dispute, but that's how it comes across to me. So super impressive, mate. I knew you had a dream job. CEO of a football club in Australia is amazing. I was super interested in the career journey you had, and now it hits home that you're you're successful because you're great at what you do, and you really think of those key elements with the people that you work for. So awesome, mate. I really appreciate your time.
Mate, thank you for the opportunity. And you're right, mate. Our club is our people, and without people, any business doesn't work at all, mate.
Yeah, and the best news of this, mate, is footy is back. So bring it on. We're all ready for it. I'm sure you are as excited as anyone else. You talked about that purpose is to get a football club as best as you can be. So we're all going to be watching, and good luck, mate, for the rest of the year.
Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.